Oh, testing, Yo San. Okay, so welcome back to the part 4 of our chapter 25 video, in which this time we are going to finish up this chapter by looking at the Hong Kong linked exchange rate system. Okay, it's a little bit complicated, so let's start a little bit slower. Okay, now can you go to page 26 of your note? Now remember, we talk about there are two types of exchange rate system. One of them is a floating, another one would be a so-called linked exchange rate system. And Hong Kong, now namely, we are going to mainly go through the linked exchange rate system. But remember, as we go through the system, you will see that in fact it's a mix of both. It's a mix of both linked and floating exchange rate system. Okay, now let me switch to another. Here, let's go to here. Now, first of all, the first thing you need to know is that the system runs on two ends. Now, it doesn't run on one end only, but it runs on two ends here. Now, in the middle part, we have banks. Now, more specifically, the three currency issuing banks, HSBC, Bank of China, and Standard Chartered. Okay, these three currency issuing banks. Now, on one hand, we have our HKMA as our so-called central bank. Okay, on another hand, we have a market, the free market in Hong Kong. Okay, now the system treat the two sides differently. 原來兩邊係唔同嘅。On one hand, between HKMA and banks, they always can guarantee a rate of 1 USD equals to 7.8 Hong Kong dollar. Now this is a fixed rate here. 呢個絕對係 fixed 㗎。Okay. On another hand, when banks doing business with us in the market, right? Here, they actually would be under floating rates. And usually, okay, under some mechanism, it can flow between 7.75 to 7.85 Hong Kong dollar to 1 USD. Okay, 得唔得？佢會自動係 floating 㗎啦，好嘛？ All right, so this is the system we are running. Now again, immediately you see, not everything is fixed. In the market side, it is floating. Only in the HKMA side that it would be fixed. Okay, 好嘛？ Now, so this is a basic system. So how does the system works? Now that's the point, right? Now, because remember, the objective of the linked exchange rate system is to make sure the market rate will be stable. 成個聯繫匯率最緊要嘅 stabilize 咗個 market rate 嘛，係咪？ So how does it work? Let's ask the question. Now let's imagine 我哋試下發生咩事啦。Now there are two cases. Let's imagine the first case. 嗱睇住咯喎，喂，等我陣啊。Okay, the two cases. First case, let's imagine right now the market rate somehow becomes 1 USD equals to 10 Hong Kong dollar. 好嘛？嗱，你見到有件咁嘅事啦。So what happens is that the banks, being very selfish, remember, they will do an action we call buy low, sell high, arbitrage OK 會唔會啊？得唔得？佢話啦，低買高賣 to earn a profit. So how does it work? Here, remember, OK now this table we have seen it in the last video. We have pay, receive, then here we have the HKMA side and the market side. Now remember, right? Remember, HKMA side, it is always 1 to 7.8. Now market right now 1 to 10. So how can we buy low, sell high to earn a profit in our case? 好啦，睇住啦。Now since in the market we know Hong Kong dollar quite cheap, right? 係嘛？ Therefore we would buy Hong Kong dollar from market. We would buy Hong Kong dollar because Hong Kong dollar being cheap, right? So what we do, we pay 1 USD to receive 10 Hong Kong dollar. 好啦 then the next thing what we do, we go back to HKMA, pay them 10 Hong Kong dollar. 好啦 then how much USD can we earn? Let's see. Here, let me try. 好啦，我哋試下啦，計數先。10 divided by 7.8, it will give us 1.28, right? We get 1.28 USD. So, what would be the total gain or total loss in our case? 睇住咯噃 The total gain will be, 嗱記住啦 pay, this is a negative, receive positive, right? So, we have negative 10 Hong Kong dollar, we have plus 10 Hong Kong dollar. Now, this will cancel out, right? 好啦 here, negative 1 USD plus 1.28 USD. In total, we earned 0.28 USD. 得唔得 Okay, so you see this, right? 係嘛 So, banks, when there is a difference between the two rates, the fixed one and the floating one, banks will do this action to earn profit. Now, but the more important thing is that how would this action affect the exchange rate? Now, let's look at the line market here. 我哋望望 market 呢度發生咩事 Remember, since the bank is actually receiving, okay, receiving money from the market. So what does that mean? In the market, basically the supply of Hong Kong dollar would go down. 而家咪銀行拎走啲港幣，掟咗去 HKMA 啊，咁咪成個市場少咗港幣咯。The supply of Hong Kong dollar goes down. When supply goes down, the price of Hong Kong dollar or the exchange rate would go up. 係嘛 It would go up until when? 嗱，原來啦，港幣就會升值啦。In this case, Hong Kong dollar will appreciate against US dollar until when? 係咪佢會升值啦 Remember, until it becomes around this range again, 1 to 7.8. 記唔記得 Whenever there is a difference, then there would be profit until they become the same. There will be no profit. Okay? 得唔得 Alright, so this is the case when Hong Kong dollar is being too cheap in the market. Okay, 嗱你見唔見啊 This system, HKMA does not need to do anything. Banks will help you to do it automatically because they want to earn profit. Okay, 好唔好啊？所以呢個啦，係嘛 Because they want to earn profit, the side effect is that supply of Hong Kong dollar will go down, which means push up the price, the currency, okay, the exchange rate. Okay, now what about another case? 如果倒轉咧，會發生咩事啊 Let's try another case here. Now, what happens when the market rate right now 1 USD to let's say 5 Hong Kong dollar. 5 Hong Kong dollar. So let's see what happens. Again, we pay something, we receive something. We have the Hong Kong MA side, and we have the market side. 記住啦 HKMA 1 to 7.8, market 1 to 5. Now, do you see? In terms of Hong Kong MA, right now Hong Kong dollar is cheaper， 係嘛？你用美金去買多啲港幣啦，唔係 ？So what would the banks do? They would pay 1 USD in order to buy 7.8 Hong Kong dollar, right? Then using this 7.8 Hong Kong dollar, they will sell it in the market. Okay, they will sell it in the market to receive 會幾多啊？睇下先。Let's see, it will be 7.8 divided by 5 to receive 1.56. No, this is USD, right? USD, right? 好嘛？呢個前面有冇除錯數？我諗諗先。前面呢度有冇除錯數啊？ No, it's okay. All right, 記唔記得？ Now, so what happens is that in total, it goes like this. Now, receive, right? Pay. So, these two cancels out. We get 1.56 USD minus 1 USD. Then we earn 0.56 USD. 記唔記得？銀行所有 so banks would do this action automatically. 得唔得？ Because there is profit to make. 佢自動波就會做呢個動作㗎啦，好唔好啊？ So what would be the effect on the market? Let's take a look. Since banks are paying the money to the market, what does that mean? It means that the supply of Hong Kong dollar in the market will go up. 好啦， when supply goes up, price of Hong Kong dollar goes down. 係咪啊？所以會貶值啦， we start to depreciate until when? Until it becomes 1 to 7.8 again. Now, of course, in reality, the market will be allowed to flow between 7 to 7.5 to 7.85. Okay, 會俾個走盞位佢嘅，好嘛？ So until it reaches. So do you see? This is a very smart， 其實係一個好聰明嘅 system 嚟㗎。With this system, HKMA does not need to do anything. They just sit back and let the banks do it for them. Okay, in the ideal case, of course, right? So first of all, hopefully you understand the basic mechanism of how this linked exchange rate system will stabilize our market rate. Now, naturally, you ask the question, right? 哇，咁銀行唔聽話點算啊？ What if banks do not cooperate? 嗱，會發生㗎。Okay, let's say the banks finds the profit not high enough. 喂，咁少嘅 ，they can use the same money to buy other currency. 投資其他有錢啲喎。So sometimes they will not do it. So what happens is that whenever the rate jump outside of 7.75 to 7.85, then HKMA would do this action, not relying on banks. They would directly go to the market to buy or sell Hong Kong dollar. OK， 佢直接去市場度做嘢㗎啦。OK， 得唔得？ So in case banks do not cooperate, then HKMA would do it by themselves. 得唔得？ So this is the basic working principle of the whole system. Okay, now please make sure you know what's going on here before you proceed to the next part of the video. Okay, 好嘛？好啦，嗱 assuming you understand what's going on in this part. Now let's go back to our notes, and there are some notes we need to remind ourselves. 好啦，嗱 with that system, there are some implications of the system. Okay, number one, because we have a band, right? The band, the market rate, right? Remember, market rate follows 1 USD to 7.78 to 7 point here, Hong Kong dollar, right? That means when US dollar, the market rate changes, Hong Kong dollar would follow the trend of USD. 因為美金變咗 whenever USD changes, it may fall outside of this range. Now, once it falls outside of this range, then Hong Kong dollar will self-adjust. The reality will become we will follow the direction of US dollar. 咁但我哋係會跟美金㗎。The exchange rate or sometimes 歐斯啦 interest rate, we also follow that of the US dollar because of our linked exchange rate system. Okay, 得唔得？ Now this is one. Now number two, something to do with HKMA. Remember, I just said banks sometimes do not cooperate. 有時佢唔聽話喎，係嘛？ So when they do not cooperate, then HKMA will need to intervene in the market by themselves. Right? 所以啦 in order to keep the market stable, HKMA would need to keep a large amount of foreign exchange reserve in order to intervene in the market when needed. OK， 嗱係要揸好多㗎 ，just in case that someone is playing tricks with Hong Kong dollar, which happened some years ago, actually many years ago, 1997. OK， 金融風暴啦 ，financial crisis. A guy called Soros 索羅斯啦 ，he was single-handedly playing around with Hong Kong dollar. 好彩我哋有外匯儲備咋 ，we have enough foreign exchange reserve to counteract him, or else we would have died. 爭啲港幣瀨嘢㗎啦，好嘛？嗱 ，but it's too old ago. You haven't even born. 你都未出世啊嗰陣時。嗱 ，anyway, okay, so this is second point. Now the third point, very important. Hong Kong cannot carry out monetary policies effectively. 嗱，記唔記得咩叫 monetary policy? Do you remember what exactly is a monetary policy? When we talk about monetary policy, we are talking about changing the market through manipulating money supply. But the problem is, you see, right? When money supply changes, it also changes the exchange rate. 頭先見唔見啊 ？Through the system we talk about, banks or HKMA would need to counteract the change in money supply. 係嘛 ？For example, if you print too much money, 係嘛 ？You print too much money. What happens, right? Your currency goes down. Then you will need to push it up again by taking away the supply. So any monetary policy would effectively be cancelled out because of the linked exchange rate system. Okay, in fact, it is equally well to say the monetary base of Hong Kong is fully backed by USD. Because remember, on the left side of our diagram, 你自己睇返啦 Hong Kong MA always need 1 to 7.8 in order to issue currency. You need to pay the corresponding amounts of USD. 一定要㗎，好嘛 ？Right, so this is the linked exchange rate system, how it works, right? Now let's try to wrap up our video with a lot of examination examples. All right, now let's go to the next page. Here, now under the linked exchange rate system, which of the following is true? Okay, now first of all, exchange rate of Hong Kong dollar relative to renminbi is fixed. No, it should be relative to USD. We are linked with the USD. 係咪？好啦，嗱 second, the market exchange rate relative is fixed. Remember, market, not fixed, but market is actually floating. 得唔得？記住啊 ，market is under a floating rate arrangement between 7 here 7 to 7.75 to 7.85。OK， 好嘛？好啦。The competitiveness of Hong Kong exports decrease when US dollar appreciates against other currencies. 嗱，慢慢嚟啊。When USD appreciates, what happens? It is equally well to say Hong Kong dollar appreciates. 好啦 ，when Hong Kong dollar appreciates, right, the price in terms of foreign currency would increase. 好啦，呢嘢貴咗喎。So what happens to your competitiveness? Actually, your competitiveness would decrease instead of increase. 你會少咗出口啊。Okay, so the answer would be D. Hong Kong. No. Actually, which one is true? True. 我應該睇錯咗啲嘢啦。Yes. Actually, C is the answer. It would decrease. Right? It would decrease. Answer would be C. What about D? We don't have a balance of payment problems. Remember, we are only talking about exchange rate. Exchange rate has very little to do with balance of payment. Okay? In fact, all countries may face, all economies may face balance of payments problem. 任何經濟體系都有機會㗎。Okay? So that's it for this question. All right, next one. Year 2000, question 52. Okay, 嗱，望望發生咩事啦？ Now, suppose the Japanese yen appreciates greatly against the US dollar. Now, remember, USD depreciate against yen is the same as saying, because of the linked exchange rate system, it's the same as saying Hong Kong dollar also depreciates greatly against Japanese yen. Okay, 好嘛? So here, Hong Kong dollar will depreciate greatly against Japanese yen. Basically, the same. Okay, Euro irrelevant, 唔解啦。好啦 ，next one. 2001, under the linked exchange rate system in Hong Kong, now the market exchange rate of Hong Kong dollar relative to US dollar is fixed. Remember, market is a floating, not fixed, right? Market exchange rate of the Hong Kong dollar relative to currency other than the US dollar are fixed. No, Hong Kong always runs a floating arrangement. 記住啦，香港是自由市場啦 ，OK, always floating. Now, what about this? Hong Kong dollar will depreciate against when US dollar appreciate against. No, actually, when USD appreciates, it means Hong Kong dollar also appreciates. 應該同一個方向先啱㗎。Okay, so answer will be D. Hong Kong dollar will appreciate when US dollar appreciate. Yes, it should be the case. Okay, D would be the answer we want. Okay, 好嘛？唔難啦。Now next one. 2006, question 47. Under the linked exchange rate system, here the exchange rate relative to USD is fixed. Foreign exchange market 嗱，講咗好多次啦 ，market floating 係嘛，講咗好多次啦，好冇 ？So A is not correct. So D is also not correct. Now B, if the mainland China has visible trade surplus, Hong Kong will also have a visible trade surplus. Again, I just talked about, right? Exchange rate has little, I'm not saying irrelevant, but very little to do with balance of payment. 係嘛 ？Very little 係嘛 ？So you cannot conclude anything about balance of payment. So answer would be C. USD depreciate. Hong Kong dollar also depreciate. Yes, they follow the same direction. OK， 好易啫係咪啊？唔難啦。So next one. Now 2008, question 50. OK, now here you see, in this table, you will see that US dollar would depreciate. Okay, 串錯字 depreciate against this one should be Japanese yen 係嘛？原來美金貶值喎。Equally well to say Hong Kong dollar depreciates against Japanese yen 等於港幣都變咗值啦。嗱 ，therefore we know Hong Kong export would increase, import would decrease. Okay, at least to the extent with the trade between Hong Kong and Japan. 好啦 under the link exchange rate system, let's see. Increase in the competitiveness of the export. Yes, because the price in terms of Japanese yen would decrease. 會跌啊，係咪？用日元計啲嘢會跌咗啊，所以買多啲咯，係咪 ？Number one. Now number two, decrease in the number of Hong Kong tourists to Japan. Yes, because in terms of Hong Kong dollar, things in Japan becomes more expensive. So number two, correct. Now what about number three? A decrease in the total value of Hong Kong import from Japan. 好啦 import from Japan. So this is a Japanese good. 係嘛？日本嘅貨 now calculated in terms of Hong Kong dollar. Do they match? No, not match the origin. Therefore, unless we know anything about the elasticity, this will be an uncertain answer. Okay, answer 1 and 2. 好嘛？應該一同二先啱喎。Answer A. Okay, number 3 is not correct. It's actually uncertain. Okay, 好嘛？ All right, next one. 2009, question 49. Again, here you are given a table USD to Korean won. Now here again, you see USD appreciates against Korean won. Equally well to say Hong Kong dollar also appreciate against Korean won. 係嘛？好啦，既然我升值啦 ，so Hong Kong our import increase, export decrease. 係嘛？我哋會記得呢樣嘢啦。好啦， now would lead to something, right? First, more Korean tourists visiting Hong Kong. No, remember, the price in terms of Korean won would have increased. 係咪香港嘢貴咗啊？ So there will be fewer tourists. 好啦 more Hong Kong tourists visiting Korean. Yes, because the price in terms of Hong Kong dollar would have decreased. 係嘛？平咗啊？係嘛？韓國嘢平咗啊？咪去買韓國嘢咯。好嘛 fewer US tourists visiting Hong Kong and fewer US tourists visiting Korea. 唔解啦，應該明㗎啦。OK， 好嘛 so answer would be B here. OK， 好嘛，好啦 now next one. Now under the link exchange rate system， 我睇下騰位先，有啲亂啊。好啦 now under the link exchange rate system, so what happens? The exchange rate of Hong Kong dollar with US dollar in market is fixed. 唔講啦，講咗好多次啦，係咪啊？ Market is floating, not fixed. Hong Kong government need not hold a large amount. No, just the opposite. They need to hold an extremely large amount of foreign exchange reserve. 係咪啊？好啦 Hong Kong citizen can give the Hong Kong government Hong Kong dollar. Can you? No. Remember, HKMA only deals with banks, not you. 你唔可以走去金管局換錢㗎。No, only banks can do that. So C is not correct. Now what about D? The Hong Kong dollar banknotes are fully backed by foreign exchange reserve. Yes, exactly the case. Okay, answer would be D here. 好嘛 will be D here. 好啦，下一個啦。Under the linked exchange rate system, when British pound depreciates against US dollar, which means USD appreciates, meaning Hong Kong dollar would also appreciate against British pound. So when we appreciate, our import increase, export decreases. 係咪？ Now, this is our usual case, right? An increase in the quantity of Hong Kong electrical appliances exported to Britain. No. Remember, the price in terms of British pound would have increased. 貴咗啊，買香港嘢會貴咗啊，所以買少啲咯。A decrease in quantity bought by Hong Kong people. No. The price in terms of Hong Kong dollar would have decreased. So, people would buy more things from Britain. 好啦 ，C. Number of Hong Kong people visiting US 關係鬼事 right? US, we are very stable. Our exchange rate with USD is very stable. So no, not the case. Now D, a decrease in the number of tourists visiting Hong Kong. Yes, we just mentioned, right? The price in terms of British pound have increased. Therefore, there would be fewer tourists. 貴咗啊，香港嘢。Okay, answer would be D here. 好嘛? All right, next one. Now, next question. Here, you are given a table, USD to British pound. Now, you see in this table, USD has appreciated against British pound, which means Hong Kong dollar would also appreciate against British pound, meaning our import increase, export decrease. Okay, 好嘛？睇下啦， will lead to an increase in number of tourists to Hong Kong? No, we just talked about, right? Price in terms of British pound would have increased, so there will be fewer tourists coming. Increase in competitiveness of British export in Hong Kong. 即係香港嘅 import 啦。Yes, because in terms of Hong Kong dollar, the price have decreased. Therefore, competitiveness increased. Yes. What about C and D? Look at C. British import from Hong Kong. 好啦 from Hong Kong, meaning this is a Hong Kong good, but in British pound. So, not match. When it doesn't match, what does that mean? It means it will be uncertain unless you know anything about the elasticity. The same here. Next one, British export to Hong Kong, meaning we are talking about some British good. But in Hong Kong dollar, again, not match. Therefore, this will be uncertain. 好嘛，所以 uncertain 啦。Alright, so C and D are both wrong because we do not know anything about elasticity. Okay, 好嘛，好啦，嗱 what about next question? Now, under the linked exchange rate system in Hong Kong, now the market exchange rate fixed 唔講啦，講到好多次啦 ，market floating 啊。Okay, now the free note issuing banks in Hong Kong have the obligation at the linked rate. Remember, we just talked about market is floating. There is no obligation to exchange in the market using 1 to 7.8. 冇責任㗎。Okay, 好啦。C, Hong Kong dollar banknotes do not have to be fully backed. No, it has to be fully backed. So, answer would be D. Market exchange rate relative to euro will move in the same direction as that of US dollar. Yes, this is exactly one of the implications we just talked about, right? 係咪？所以答案 D 啦 very easy. Right? Now, what about, now we are moving into DSE area, finally. 好啦，望望啦。Now, sample paper here. Given a table like this, 好啦，咁有個咁嘅 table 啦，發生咩事啦 ？Okay, we know US dollar right now has depreciated against, what is this? I think this is euro. Yes, euro depreciates against euro, meaning Hong Kong dollar would also depreciate against euro. Now, when we depreciate, I think you guys already know 我哋貶值會發生咩事啊？ Export increase, import decrease, 係咪？ As always. All right, so let's see. We'll lead to first decrease in the number of tourists of European tourists visiting Hong Kong. Actually, the price in terms of euro should have decreased. So there should be more people coming, not decrease. Second, a decrease in the number of Hong Kong tourists visiting the US. 關係咩事啊？ US, none of your business, right? We are relatively stable, so there shouldn't be any change. 好啦 C, increase in the quantity of European cars exported to Hong Kong. Now remember, the price in terms of Hong Kong dollar have increased. Therefore, I should import less. So answer would be D. Increase in the quantity of Hong Kong garments exported to Europe. Yes, because again, the price in terms of euro has decreased. 係咪平咗啊？想買多啲咯。So answer should be D. D. Okay, 好嘛？好啦，嗱 next one，嗱 you see 70% 都幾多人啱㗎 係嘛? A lot of people know what they are doing. So which one is correct? Now first, Hong Kong dollar banknote are fully backed by US dollar. Yes. Renminbi, no, nothing to do with renminbi when we talk about linked exchange rate system. 我哋係同美金掛鈎啫嘛，唔係同人民幣掛鈎喎，好嘛？ Now second, Hong Kong MA holds a considerable amount of foreign exchange reserve. Yes, this is true. Like what I talk about, because when banks fail to work on the mechanism, HKMA will need to do it by themselves, right? So they need to hold a lot of money. Number two, correct. Number three, note issuing banks can exchange US dollar at a linked exchange rate with HKMA. Yes, this is a promise. 1 to 7.8. 2 and 3, answer C. OK, 好嘛？好，睇埋 D 啦。好 D 講咩啊？ The exchange rate of Hong Kong dollar to US dollar in the market is fixed. 講咗好多次啦，係咪啊？ It should be floating, not fixed, right? 嗱，70% 啱啊。So you need to get these correct. 70% 啊，得唔得？好啦 ，next one. Now suppose Korean won depreciates against US dollar, which means USD appreciates, right? 好啦 ，when USD appreciates, Hong Kong dollar also appreciates, right? 好啦 ，when we appreciate, so our export would decrease, import would increase. 好啦，睇睇啦。Number one, volume of imported goods from South Korea to Hong Kong would increase. Now think about it. The price in terms of Hong Kong dollar, okay, would have decreased. Therefore, yes, we would import more. Volume of import would increase. Yes, number one correct. Now what about number two? Now number two 睇住咯喎。The price of exported goods from Hong Kong to South Korea here from Hong Kong to South Korea， 我哋係香港嘅貨 in terms of Hong Kong dollar would have increased. Actually, only the price in terms of Korean won would increase. But the price in terms of Hong Kong dollar, 香港嘅漢堡包會唔會貴咗？ No, it will be unchanged. Okay, so unchanged. Number two, not correct. Answer would be B here. 好啦，最後啦 ，the number of tourists from South Korea to Hong Kong would decrease. Yes, because we talk about price in terms of Korean won would have increased. Therefore, there would be fewer tourists from South Korea coming to Hong Kong. 貴咗啊啲嘢。Okay, 好嘛 ，by law of demand, it would be the case. So number 1 and 3, answer boy. 好嘛，好啦。Now next question. Now again, 62%. Quite a lot of people get it right. 好多人都啱㗎。好嘛，好啦。Under the linked exchange rate system of Hong Kong, which of the following statement is correct? 嗱，不如倒轉嚟睇咁就嘛。嗱 D, the current account deficit in USD will lead to 嗱，啱啱先講完啦。Exchange rate, would it necessarily directly affect BOP? No. 嗱，唔知啊，我唔知會唔會 current account deficit 啊 ？No. Okay, so D, not correct. What about C? Now, Hong Kong import volume will increase when US dollar appreciates. 嗱，記住啦 ，when USD appreciates, it means Hong Kong dollar also appreciates. When we appreciate, our export decrease, import increase. 係嘛 ？Import volume would increase. Yes, this is the case. 好啦 ，boy, market exchange rate fixed 唔講啦。Now let's talk about M1 here. Now what it says is that the money supply M1 of Hong Kong has to be fully backed by the US dollar. Remember what is M1? M1 equals to cash held by public plus demand deposit. 記唔記得？ Okay, true. Now, as opposed to M0, CP plus reserve. Remember, we talk about M0 because they are physical money. M0 is fully backed. But M1, the problem is this part, demand deposit. Remember, back in our chapter 22, demand deposit can be created through loans. 佢可以靠借貸嚟到存款創造型嘅啦 ，credit creation。 Since some of them are created, actually, they are not fully backed. Okay, because some of them are not physical money, only promise, some accounting. 係咪佢只係一個 account 嚟嘅啫？嗱 ，therefore this is not correct. M1 is not fully backed because part of demand deposit can be created through loan. 得唔得？可以透過存款創造啊。OK， 好嘛 ？So this one not correct. Answer would be C. 好啦 ，next one, the same here. 好啦 ，under the linked exchange rate system of Hong Kong, which of the following statement is correct? Now, first, non-bank public can sell Hong Kong dollar to HKMA. No, remember, HKMA deals with banks only. 佢唔會同你做生意嘅，得唔得？嗱 ，B, it enables Hong Kong HKMA to carry out expansionary monetary policy. No, we just mentioned, right? Hong Kong cannot effectively carry out monetary policy because any change in money supply will be offset by our linked exchange rate system. OK， 好嘛？好啦 ，C market exchange rate fixed 唔講啦 ，floating 啊。D there would be a downward pressure 嗱，即係答案係 D 啦，係咪 ？The answer will be D. There will be a downward pressure on the CPI of Hong Kong when renminbi continuously depreciates against USD. 好啦，即係咩意思啊 ？USD appreciates, meaning Hong Kong dollar also appreciates, right? 好啦 when Hong Kong dollar appreciates, what happens to the price in terms of USD, Hong Kong dollar, for those imported goods from China? It would decrease. 係咪啊？我哋中國貨攞港幣嚟計係咪會平啲啊 ？Okay, since the price in terms of Hong Kong dollar will have decreased, it means our CPI, because we also use a lot of Chinese goods, right? Therefore, our CPI would have a downward pressure, because in terms of Hong Kong dollar, right? The price in terms of Hong Kong dollar, it would have decreased. Okay, 好嘛？嗱 final MC, and then one more question, and we will conclude this whole chapter 25. 好啦，快啲啦。好 ，now 2020 係嘛 ？Question 45啊，頭先嗰條幾多嘅？40%, only 40% for whatever reason, right? 好啦 ，here. Which of the following is correct? Money supply M1 fully back up. No, we just mentioned it should be M0, not M1, right? 好啦 ，export volume will increase when USD depreciate. 好啦，睇啦 ，when USD depreciate, it means Hong Kong dollar also depreciate. 係嘛 ？When Hong Kong dollar depreciate, export increase. 係嘛 ？So volume of export would increase. Yes, this is the correct answer. Now what about C and D? Market exchange rate fixed. Floating 啊，唔講啦。Hong Kong citizen can sell to a note issuing for 7.8. Now this is not wrong, but it is not always correct because again, same as C, it is a floating. Sometimes, right? Sometimes it can be not 7.8. 因為 floating 啊，好嗎？好啦 ，last question here. Suppose the US dollar depreciates against euro. So what happens is that USD depreciates against euro, meaning Hong Kong dollar would also depreciate against euro. Okay, so what happens is that the total number of Hong Kong tourists traveling to European countries. Now, because we depreciate, so the price in terms of Hong Kong dollar would have increased. Now, therefore, right, our quantity demanded would decrease according to law of demand. 貴咗啊嘛，咁梗係唔去咁多歐洲啦。So it should decrease. Now, what about B? The price of Hong Kong toys exported to Euro, right? Hong Kong toys in terms of Euro, right? Very easy, right? The price in terms of Euro should have decreased. 係嘛? Remember, we are assuming the price in terms of Hong Kong dollar unchanged, right? So Euro would have decreased. Now, what about C? The total expenditure of Hong Kong on on imported 係嘛 European goods. Remember, the European goods price in terms of Hong Kong dollar would have increased, but the quantity would have decreased. Now, therefore, since the total value, right, total expenditure equals to P times Q, one increase, one decrease. Therefore, we are actually uncertain about the change in total expenditure. Okay? Very easy question. And with that, we are actually fully done with chapter 25. So you see, right? Chapter 25, not exactly a difficult chapter, but it requires you to think very carefully. So please make sure you spend enough time to do your revision. Okay, so until then, I think the next video, we are going to move on to our last two chapters. Okay, on chapter 13 and chapter 14. Of course, we also have chapter 24 to go, right? So until then, I'll see you again in our next video. See you. Bye-bye.